Welcome to another segment of POPA On Point. My name is Brian Moriguchi, and I'm the president of the Professional Peace Officers Association. I'm joined today by Alex Villanueva, a candidate for LA County Sheriff. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Brian.
Let me start by asking you some questions about the current sheriff and his budget. So the current budget for the Sheriff's Department is over $3 billion. Do you think you have the skills and background and experience to manage a department this size and with a budget that size?
By all means, managing an organization this large requires leadership, first and foremost, and the ability to understand the culture of the organization. You got to know where the bodies are buried, and you have to know the organization inside and out, looking from the ground up. If you just parachute from one ivory tower to another ivory tower, you're never going to understand the organization, and that's the troubles that you find Mr. McDonald in. Our budget of $3.3 billion, roughly, it still leaves us as the most under-policed local law enforcement jurisdiction in the entire country. The average of deployment of cops per population is 2.5 cops for every 1,000 residents throughout the entire country. When you go to metropolitan areas, that average rises to 3.8 cops per 1,000. And that's, big cities. You go to LAPD, they're at 2.2. So they're under the national average. You go to the Sheriff's Department, we're at 1.1. That is how understaffed we are in terms of what is normal deployment of law enforcement resources throughout the country. So we are severely understaffed. We have so many units working in one-man units. We have some places where we don't even provide 24-hour police coverage. And I live in one, so I know. And it is very difficult. A lot of the remote communities, a lot of the places that are wealthy districts but very poor in terms of tax base, have difficulty fielding or affording, deputies to patrol their communities. So we have a lot of big challenges. And you throw on top of that a mismanaged budget with very strange budgetary priorities from the current sheriff, it puts us in the place we are today. We're over budget and understaffed.
Let me ask you about the mismanagement of the budget. Can you give some examples of mismanaging our budget?
Well, right now we're structurally about $40 million in the hole, just level with what we're doing. Then you throw on all of the ancillary units that were created by the sheriff, and they've been added on historical over the years, that never were funded by the Board of Supervisors. But the sheriff funds them, and then the funding comes out of Hyde because we just assign deputies to those positions, and they're pulled out of regular assignments that have to be filled on a contractual basis or constitutional basis. Constitutional mandates, for example, unincorporated communities. You lose patrol items into these specialized assignments, contract cities. All these people are losing items that have to be replaced with overtime. So our overtime budget is constantly, every year after year, is being shot over. And I've heard of the figure of $268 million is the actual total of how much we're over budget. But it's broken in a bunch of different categories. You look at our workers' compensation costs, they're going through the roof. And a lot of it is tied to morale. People get frustrated. They don't want to deal with it anymore. And my back hurts, and off they are. And guess what? We pay the price. Taxpayer ultimately pays the price. So we need to have a lot better job than we're doing right now, and the taxpayer shouldn't be footing the bill for McDonald's mismanagement.
Let me ask you, one of the units he created is a human trafficking unit. And I think we can all agree that that's an important thing to address. But he did take it out of Hyde, right? So how would you have handled that differently?
We had people that were investigating human trafficking, and they were assigned to Major Crimes Bureau. But now we created an entire new bureau with a new captain, new administrative staff. That's another layer of bureaucracy on top of the people removed from Hyde from other organizations to fill it. We could have very well filled the function under Major Crimes Bureau, just assigning a greater number of detectives to that particular function, and have a lieutenant, for example, be as a detail of the Major Crimes Bureau. That is just one example, but it's a good one. Baca did it with domestic violence. He assigned a sergeant, I think 10 or 11 deputies to do something with domestic violence. They all sound great. They all have this common theme. They look real good PR tools. When you look at the details, you realize they're not funded at all. and it comes out of other operational necessities of the organization, which means our ability to detect in the field the human traffic and all that, we're losing a lot of sets of eyes because now they're being reassigned just to that. But guess what? All those referrals come from patrol where we work, and we're losing those eyes to there. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Okay, great, thank you. I had some figures on the crime rates, but it's hard for me to figure because it's so different from one website to another.
I agree.
But it does appear that crime has increased over the last several years. Now, I don't attribute that to Jim McDonnell. I attribute it to a lot of the laws that were passed that put a lot of criminals back on the street. Could be a combination, I suppose, of the quality of law enforcement or budget restraints and all that, as well as the people released on the streets. But what do you believe? Do you believe that crime rates have gone up? And if so, how would you bring those back down as a sheriff?
We do know that crime has gone up. We know that violent crime has gone up. I took the figures from McDonnell's own information that he released before he started hiding data, and I looked at the calendar years 2015, 16, and 17, were his first full 3 years in office. And I measured the Part 1 crime rates, which are the violent crimes, murder, rape, robbery, kidnapping, arson, I think is in GTA, I want to say. I think those are the big ones. And I measured a 9% increase in those 3 years. Those are hard numbers, 9% increase. And then for year 2018, we're in the middle of it. And according to publications that I've read, 60% of the jurisdictions that we police are seeing an increase in crime. I think there was a study that was released just a few weeks ago that pointed to the effects of Prop 47. And a lot of it had to do with property crimes are on the increase, which don't really reflect in Part 1 crime rates. So we have Part 1 crime rates, the violent crimes going up. We have property crimes going up, and they attributed that to Prop 47 in particular, the property crime ones, but not the violent crimes. But then April of last year, the LA Times released an article where they did a study about the arrest rates of LAPD and the sheriffs. They actually put them side by side, which is kind of rare to find. And they concluded that both organizations saw a 25% drop in arrests, which coincided with the increase in crime. So the two figures, they are related. And you're correct, there's a lot of variables in play with what impacts crime rates. And unemployment is one, migration patterns within the country, other ones, and the homeless rate. You have AB 109, prison realignment, Prop 47, Prop 57, and then what we do in law enforcement. You also have a lot of deputies that are putting their hands in their pockets and saying, it's not worth it to stick my neck out because I don't trust my sheriff to do the right thing. And that impacts crime because then the people that need to be stopped, that need to be looked at closely in terms of their criminal activities or not. Deputies got the windows rolled up doing the Rose Parade wave. That impacts crime too, and we need to end that.
Let me ask you how you motivate the deputies, because I know I live in a sheriff's jurisdiction, and some of my neighbors had called the police regarding vehicle break-ins. And they were told, and it's unfortunate, but they were told that there's no real reason for us to come out and take a report because even if we catch them, they won't go to jail. And that has to do with the new laws. Mm-hmm. But it's understandable from the deputy's standpoint because they want to focus on going after criminals and putting them behind bars. So they're going to target more of the violent criminals now instead of the property crimes. But then property crimes spike because those people are basically untouchable going out there committing all these crimes. How would you motivate your deputies to still take those reports, take people to jail, even knowing that those people will just revolving door and go right back out?
At Pico Station, I was facing that problem, and we were very effective at motivating deputies to do their job, even though the rules of the game changed and it made it a lot more cumbersome in terms of the payoff of seeing someone set aside and incapacitated for a significant amount of time. They were out that very same day with a ticket, when it was before it was a felony. That frustration is understandable, but By the same token, we explain to them, hey, you know what? A little more cumbersome, we're doing a little more paperwork, but you're still going to get the very same people accountable, because then they get released, they're not going to go to court, it's going to go to warrant, and eventually you're going to get the same person now staying a little bit longer. It's just we added a couple of steps in the process. And they embraced that, and they actually started cranking out those misdemeanor arrests left and right. And yeah, they came with the citations and the ones that have to be booked at the station. You can't release them in the field. And they were doing all that stuff. So when the deputies are motivated and they know they have the backing of the sheriff and of their executive, their unit commanders, they're going to do the right thing and they're going to make that impact. But it takes good people in charge to tell them what you're doing is valuable. The game is changing slightly. We just got to adapt to the changes and continue that commitment to serving the community.
What are some of the things you would do as the sheriff to improve community relations and police and community relations, as well as police and race relations?
Well, one thing we need to do, and I've said this from the very beginning, is I want to value what deputies do in patrol. We created an organization over the years now where, in fact, Lee Bach himself told me, you need to get out of patrol as soon as you can, when I was a newly promoted sergeant. I was like, oh, that's kind of a weird to coming from him, because that's the whole purpose we're here, is to serve the community. But in the eyes of the organization, the longer you remain in patrol, you are considered damaged goods. I need to get rid of that stigma, and I want to value patrol. I want to have each assignment that you do in patrol is a lasting one, a long-term one, where you develop those long-term relations with the community. They know you, you know them. So when we have times of crisis, you're that familiar source of help for the community. Say, okay, it's so-and-so's kid is off his meds and doing this and that. Okay, we know where the kid lives, know where the parents live. Let's get them on board, see how we can contain this problem, and maybe get the MET team, our mental evaluation team, involved, and we can slow everything down and find ways to de-escalate situations. Best way to de-escalate situation is that you know who the people are. If you're doing drive-by justice where the players keep changing every year, going on chasing assignment after assignment because they think somehow that's going to pad their resume, it doesn't. We need people's resume built on serving the community, and that's at the deputy rank, sergeant rank, lieutenant rank. All three of those ranks. I need long-term commitment to one community. When we do that, race relations, community relations are going to be strengthened, because it's the same people, and the ones who are successful are back serving that same community at a different rank, at a different capacity, but it's the same people, and that's how we resolve that.
Great, thank you. The Board of Supervisors a few years ago created the Civilian Oversight Commission, and there has been an effort by some of those commissioners to obtain subpoena power. We have opposed subpoena power. The Board of Supervisors has opposed it, as has the sheriff. It's my understanding that you support subpoena power. Can you explain that position?
Your understanding is wrong. I'm actually opposed to the subpoena power, and I've stated that unequivocally since day one. I think it's inappropriate. However, I understand how their demand for the subpoena power came to be, because McDonald was not being transparent and it was not cooperating with lawful requests from the Oversight Commission. So they decided, well, if he's going to ignore our requests, we're just going to go around him and get the public to grant us the authority. So I've told, in fact, the people who are leading that movement, I've told them, if you succeed in a ballot measure and it's voted on, I'll respect it, of course, because it becomes a law. However, you have a legal deficiency because the state constitution dictates the authority of the sheriff, and a local ordinance can't supersede the state law. So you're always going to have that legal issue which is going to tie up your thing. However, I'm going to give you all the information I can legally give you. I want the Civilian Oversight Commission to be a stakeholder, to represent the interests of the entire county, and to give me good advice, good information, so I make decisions, I make informed decisions with their input. Any policy, practice, program, anything we're going to do or we're currently doing or we're contemplating doing, I want it run it through the commission to get their input. And they're not going to need subpoena power because I'm going to give them the information they're legally entitled to. Of course, we're going to exclude personnel files and stuff like that, investigations that are still ongoing that haven't been resolved, that won't be public. But That's the information that McDonald has been denying them left and right for no reason other than they're going after things they want to know about because they think there's a problem, and he believes it makes them look bad, so his advisors tell him just don't cooperate. So that's why this is a result, an outcome of his failure to be transparent as sheriff.
Let me ask you about, on that same vein, I believe it's the LA Times who filed a lawsuit against the county and the sheriff about failure to release legally required documents under Public Records Act. Do you believe that what you just said about the advice that he may be getting to not release information, do you think that that's going on today, failing to release information that is required to be released by the law?
Oh yes, by all means. His advisor are telling him just don't release anything because a lot of the information they're requesting are stuff that they realize is bad. It's going to make them look bad, and that's their job. Be it journalists, be it LA Times, be it the Oversight Commission, they're going after things they see as problems. They either want to report on them, they want to act on them, make recommendations, and he's shutting down all that. In fact, he even put out a memo, I want to say it was last month, to department employees saying that the official business of the Sheriff's Department is confidential. That is absolutely flat out wrong.
What does that mean? That he
means
doesn't have to release any
anything,
information?
pretty much. And from my perspective as sheriff, the official business of the Sheriff's Department is the public's business. And that is the difference in philosophy with McDonald and myself. There are things, obviously, that can't be released publicly and legally because of either Peace Officer Bill of Rights or because it's going to threaten, harm someone, the release of information like victims of sex crimes, all those different categories. Yeah, those don't get released. But short of that, everything else that we do on the department is public. It is a public's business because we represent and serve the public. So I don't know how he came up with the idea that the official business of the department is confidential. No, it's not.
Thank you. I believe that McDonald has taken a stance on immigration that ICE should be allowed into the jails to work with his department, and that the benefit of that is that ICE is not out in the community trying to hook people up out there instead of dealing with the ones we already have in custody. What is your position on working with ICE?
I've supported SB 54 from the very beginning, and it has received a lot of misinterpretation and misrepresentation in the press. A lot of it comes from politically motivated individuals behind the whole sanctuary state thing. SB 54 has about 800 plus categories of crimes that allow for those convicted of those crimes to be transferred to the custody of ICE. Over 800 of them. But you hear people talk about Sanctuary City, oh my God, they're letting everybody run free, and no. It strikes a healthy balance between those who pose a threat to the community and those who don't. The poor guy that got hooked up on traffic warrants, failure to appear, DUI, one-time simple things, they're not going to be a threat. Unfortunately, when the Trump administration changed the emphasis from what both the Bush Jr. and the Obama administrations did in terms of enforcement of immigration rules, he created a quandary because there were study after study that showed that people stopped reporting sexual assaults, workplace violence, sexual harassment, rape, all these different things were not being reported because of the fear was that if you report it to local authorities, you may get deported or someone's going to get deported. So people just are not going to involve local law enforcement at all. So actually that policy from ICE made public safety worse because it increased crime rates in a lot of these strong immigrant communities that have a very heavy immigrant population, because the undocumented are just not cooperating at all. That doesn't do anybody any good. SB 54 allows for those categories that qualify to be transferred to ICE custody, and I will allow that. Not a penny more, just that. Because I want to keep that bright line of separation between what local law enforcement does and federal immigration. They can do their job. If they come to our jails with an arrest warrant, like any other law enforcement agency, they're going to get their body, like everybody else does. We're not going to honor administrative holds because those are deemed to be unconstitutional by multiple courts. And we're just going to honor, SB 54, the law of the land. It strikes at healthy balance. We let immigration do their job, and we're going to continue to do our job and not have the two confused.
Let me ask you a question about body cams, because I know it's a very popular topic that government is really struggling with as to how to implement the body cams. We, early on, did not oppose body cams because, frankly, I think it shows a lot of the things that the officers see and encounter, and it will actually make cases better for us. Of course, if you're doing something wrong, it captures that as well. What are your views on body cams, and would you try to implement body cameras for your personnel?
The price tag for body cams, and we already know it's not the hardware, it's the data. How do you index, make the data searchable, retrievable, all these things. And the price tag that I heard was $55 million a year. That also equates to 300 deputies a year. As understaffed as we are, can we devote that amount of money to the body cams, or do we hire 300 more deputies? Which one saves more lives? I would argue that the 300 saves more lives than the body cams.
Sure.
We have deputies currently using body cams. A lot of the motors use them. It's just, part of their job. And as a watch commander, I've actually reviewed body cams from motors after they've been accused of whatever conduct that became the subject of a complaint. And every single time it exonerates them to a T. So I'd say more than 9 out of 10 times the body cams show that the deputies are doing their job. It actually is a detriment to the person complaining because sometimes it shows criminal conduct, becomes evidence in criminal cases. I would encourage the voluntary use of body cams. If we become fully staffed and fully funded, that's a nicety. It's not a necessity, it's a nicety. People that I have questions about in terms of their conduct because of allegations, I may consider it appropriate. Maybe we need to have them being, use a body cam, 24/7 while they're working. Maybe they need to have a probationary period where they need to operate with the camera or assign them a 2-man unit. There's many ways to slice and dice this thing, but it's a useful tool, but it's not the end all that people think it is. And most organizations have actually bit the bullet and got them and realizing that there's a lot of cost involved, and it doesn't decrease over time, it only increases. So
you would be okay with individuals voluntarily buying body cams and wearing them?
by all means. In fact, when you and I worked patrol, we had deputies that used the audio recorders. They put them on their web gear, and it was just a normal thing for them. And it worked real good in a lot of cases. And anybody who voluntarily wants to do it, I'd be more than happy to do that. In fact, if we had a way to afford lowering the costs so they can voluntarily use them, I'd be okay with that too. Question is, doing it department-wide, it's a very big cost.
Sure. I think, and I'm not positive, maybe you would know, I think the department currently prohibits personal use of body cams.
No, they don't, because the
don't?
motors use it. That's
Okay.
that's very common in
because
motors.
they were doing a study that they didn't want all these different body cams out there, and they hadn't developed the policy on.
No, yeah, they've been
data.
on it with years. The
Okay.
motors in particular. I don't know about
Okay.
patrol deputies, but I know motors have.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I want to give you an opportunity to talk to the voters about why you believe that you would be the best selection for sheriff. So why don't you tell the voters how you feel?
I announced my candidacy in June of last year, and I understood there was a lot of problems within the organization. I spent 32 years on the Sheriff's Department, and I couldn't walk away in good conscience and leave it in the shape it is. I'm a resident of the county. My wife Vivian was born and raised in East LA, and her family still lives there, and the service the community is getting from the department is not enough to sustain the safety level that we need. The resources that the taxpayers are fronting is being misused. The sheriff is doing a very, very poor job at leading the organization. In fact, to the point where we've become the incredible shrinking department. Every year we're losing more people than we're recruiting. So we're actually shrinking year by year. when we should be growing, and we're still the most understaffed law enforcement agency in the country. We need to stop that. My platform is simple. It's reform the organization, get rid of all the elements of corruption that still exist to this day from the Paul Tanaka and Lee Baca years. They're still in office today, the same corrupt players. I'm going to rebuild the organization, implement community policing throughout the county, and I'm going to restore that trust that has been lost between the community and the organization. And the way we do this is, first, we got to retire Jim McDonald. He has not done his job. He does not deserve another term. I have the plan to make this happen. I have the credibility within the organization. And I stood up against Paul Tanaka and Lee Baca when they were in their corrupt peak of their power. And I never batted an eye. I said, that is not the way to go. This election is about leadership. It's not about how many stars you have on your collar or how many positions you claim to have had. It's not about being in the ivory tower. It's about leading people, getting the community and the department to come together and work as one. And we're going to lower the crime rate. We're going to work on ending mass incarceration in the school-to-prison pipeline. Those are things we need to change. And it starts with leadership at the top of the Sheriff's Department. So I'm asking for your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Alex, I want to thank you for joining me today. I know you have a very busy schedule campaigning, and I want to wish you all the luck.
All right, well, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.